Imagine walking through a museum, stopping in front of a photograph from 1850, and having no clue that what you're seeing is entirely fake. This isn't science fiction. It actually took place at a respected museum in New Orleans for 3 full decades. Someone intentionally changed a historical photo, hiding the reality of a wealthy black woman's identity, and no one realized it until 2018. What I'm about to show you will completely transform how you see museum artifacts and historical preservation. This isn't just about a single photograph. It's about how easily history can be reshaped to match someone's personal views, and how that erasure can remain hidden for generations. Stick with me, because this investigation gets darker and more shocking as we go further. Before we jump into this unbelievable true story, if you're into real historical mysteries and cover-ups like this, do me a favor and smash that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another mind-blowing story like this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we uncover together. Now let's dive in. Picture this: New Orleans, 1850. The city is alive with energy, trade, culture, and a complex social structure that most history books either simplify too much or leave out entirely. In a photographer's studio somewhere in the French Quarter, a woman gets ready to have her portrait taken. She is dressed perfectly for this moment. This woman sits with a posture that shows confidence and education. Her hands rest gently in her lap, fingers woven together with graceful precision. Her eyes meet the camera lens directly, unblinking, with a quiet strength that commands respect. Her music, she wears a tignon, the traditional head wrap worn by free women of color in Antebellum, New Orleans, arranged in an intricate design that required both skill and cultural knowledge to get right. But here's where the story gets interesting. What she's wearing turns this from just another old portrait into something extraordinary, something that would later make a conservator so uneasy that she would do something unthinkable. Around this woman's neck is a stunning white lace collar. We're not talking about some basic piece of fabric here. This collar has threadwork so detailed, so exact, that skilled hands would have needed weeks to make it. Every loop, every delicate pattern represents hours of expert craftsmanship. At her throat is an oval pearl brooch. Its surface still shines even after more than 150 years. The metal setting looks like gold or silver. Expensive materials reserved for jewelry of real value. Small gold earrings frame her face, catching the available light in the photographer's studio. The dress she wears is made from fine fabric, with sleeves carefully tailored to fit her perfectly. This wasn't something you could just buy off a rack. This was custom clothing made specifically for her, the kind of garment only the wealthy could order. Now, here's a fact that'll amaze you. In 1850, getting your photograph taken cost what an average worker would earn over several months. Photography was cutting-edge technology back then, and it was pricey. The process required special equipment, chemical know-how, and artistic skill. But this woman didn't just pay for the photo itself. That fancy gold leaf frame around the image, that was an extra significant expense. Families only spent that kind of money when they wanted their legacy preserved with dignity and prominence for future generations. Let me be absolutely clear about what we're looking at. This was not a servant. This was not someone of modest means trying to look richer than she really was. This was a prosperous, educated, free black woman who had the money to commission an expensive photograph and the self-assurance to present herself exactly as she was, elegantly dressed, adorned with valuable jewelry, sitting with the demeanor of someone used to being treated with respect in her community. The photograph eventually made its way to the Riverside Museum of Southern Art in New Orleans. Museum staff got it in 1985 as part of a larger collection from the Clemens estate. They hung it in Gallery 7, one of the museum's quieter exhibit spaces. A small brass label next to the frame read simply, "Unknown Free Woman of Color, circa 1850. Photographer unknown." For 30 years after its acquisition, museum visitors could see this image exactly as it was meant to be seen, as proof of Black prosperity and dignity during an era when such photographic documentation was both rare and precious. School groups passed through Gallery 7. Tourists exploring New Orleans culture stopped to read the label. Researchers studying the antebellum period examined the photo as part of their work on social structures of the time. Everything seemed normal. The photograph hung quietly on the wall, a window into a past that challenged simple stories about race, class, and opportunity in the pre-Civil War South. But in 1988, something happened that would fundamentally change this piece of history for the next 30 years. The museum hired Patricia Thornton, a conservator from Baton Rouge with a strong professional music reputation, to restore several pieces in their collection. Patricia had spent 15 years in the field. Her technical skills were beyond question. Other institutions trusted her with their valuable artifacts. Her resume was impressive, her references glowing. When Patricia unwrapped the photograph in her conservation lab, she studied it for a long time. The music, the lace collar caught her eye right away. Then the pearl brooch, the gold earrings, the fine dress with its carefully tailored sleeves. Something about what she saw bothered her at a deep level. You see, Patricia had been raised with very specific stories about the antebellum South. Her parents revered Southern history, or at least their particular version of it. Her father taught at a small college where he specialized in Antebellum, Louisiana. Growing up in that household, Patricia had absorbed countless lessons about that era, lessons about social order, about supposed racial hierarchies, about how free Black women were expected to present themselves in public. She had been taught that even prosperous free Black women knew certain limits. Yes, they could own property. Absolutely, they could run businesses. Some even built significant wealth through their efforts. But according to Patricia's upbringing, they dressed modestly. They avoided standing out. They certainly didn't adorn themselves with fancy lace and valuable pearls like white women of the planter class supposedly did. This photograph contradicted everything Patricia thought she knew about that time period. It didn't fit the story she had internalized since childhood. It challenged her worldview at its core. So, Patricia made a decision that would hide the truth for 3 decades. On a humid April morning in 1988, Patricia sat alone in her conservation lab. The photograph lay on her worktable under bright lights. Her music. She had already finished her initial technical analysis, recording the image's physical condition in her notebook with the careful precision that had built her reputation. But her notes said nothing about what she planned to do next. Patricia mixed black paint on her palette, matching the tone carefully to the aged darkness of the photograph's natural shadows. Her hands stayed steady the whole time. After 15 years of restoration work, her technical skill was undeniable. She knew exactly how to apply paint to a delicate surface without harming the underlying image. The technique itself wasn't the problem. The question wasn't whether she could do what she was planning. The question was whether she should do it at all. She looked at the lace collar again. It was undeniably beautiful. The threadwork showed remarkable craftsmanship. Whoever had made that collar had real skill and artistic talent. But that didn't matter to her, she told herself. What mattered was what she saw as historical accuracy, or rather, her version of what history should look like. Patricia had convinced herself of something that simply wasn't true. She decided the photograph must have been altered sometime after 1850. Maybe a descendant had added the lace and jewelry later, she thought, trying to boost their ancestors' social status. Maybe another conservator decades ago had made romantic additions to beautify the image. Whatever explanation she invented, she decided these elegant elements couldn't possibly be original to the 1850 photograph. She was fixing an error, she told herself. She was restoring what she believed to be historical truth, even though she had absolutely no evidence to back up her hair music assumption. With a fine brush held firmly in her experienced hand, Patricia began painting over the lace collar. She worked slowly, methodically, covering each delicate thread with dark paint. The intricate pattern disappeared under her careful strokes. She moved to the pearl brooch next, hiding its shiny surface until it vanished completely into shadow. The gold earrings met the same fate. Then the fine details visible in the dress sleeves. With each brushstroke, the woman in the photograph changed. The visible signs of wealth and status disappeared one by one. What emerged from Patricia's changes was an image that fit more comfortably into her understanding of the past, a woman dressed plainly, modestly, without any hint of elegance or prosperity. The process took her 3 full days. When Patricia finally stepped back to look at her finished work, the woman in the photograph now looked exactly as Patricia believed she should have looked in 1850. The image now matched Patricia's preconceptions about how a free black woman would have presented herself during that era. That afternoon, Patricia wrote her conservation report. Under the section labeled, "Treatment performed," she wrote, "Surface cleaning completed. Minor stabilization of emulsion. Original integrity maintained." That last sentence was a deliberate lie, but Patricia had convinced herself so thoroughly that it was the truth. The altered photograph went back to Gallery 7 in May 1988. Museum staff hung it in its previous spot with the same small brass label identifying it as "Unknown Free Woman of Color, circa 1850. But now, visitors saw something fundamentally different from what the photograph had originally shown. The woman still sat in that same dignified pose. Her bearing still showed that same quiet confidence, but her clothing now looked simple and dark. No fancy lace collar caught visitors' eyes. No pearl brooch reflected the gallery lighting. No gold earrings glinted against her skin. She looked like countless other historical photos of working class women from that era, respectable but unremarkable. Nothing that would make anyone stop for a long look. Most museum visitors walked past the photograph without a second glance. Thomas Brennan, the museum's director at the time, noticed the photograph had returned from conservation, but didn't look closely at it. He had 3 dozen other pieces needing his attention, budget meetings filling his calendar, and a major exhibition scheduled to music open in 6 weeks. Patricia's invoice said the restoration was complete and satisfactory. He signed the payment approval and turned his focus to other matters. The museum's annual report that year didn't mention the photograph at all. It was seen as a minor piece in a large collection, not particularly notable, not worth featuring in ads or special exhibits designed to draw crowds. Years passed quietly. The photograph hung in Gallery 7, gathering dust between the museum's regular cleanings. Multiple generations of visitors walked through that space. School groups came to learn about Southern history. Tourists exploring New Orleans culture wandered through. Researchers studying the Antebellum period looked at various artifacts. Some visitors paused to read the brass label. Most just kept walking. In 1995, the museum had major renovations. Gallery 7 closed temporarily, and curators moved its contents to climate-controlled storage for safekeeping during construction. When the gallery reopened 8 months later, Staff returned the photograph to a slightly different wall spot, but the same brass label still accompanied it. No one questioned what they were seeing in the image. No one wondered why such a plainly simple photograph had such an expensive gold leaf frame. No one thought to look closely at it under magnification or compare it carefully to other 1850s photos that might show inconsistencies. Patricia Thornton continued her conservation work through the 1990s and into the 2000s. She restored paintings for the Baton Rouge Museum of Art, took commissions from private collectors across Louisiana, and occasionally accepted contracts from smaller institutions around the region. Her professional reputation stayed solid and untarnished. Colleagues described her as meticulous, reliable, technically skilled, all accurate assessments of her conservation abilities. She never told another soul what she had done to that photograph in 1988. She carried that secret alone. In 2012, Patricia died of cancer at age 68. Her obituary in the Baton Rouge Advocate praised her contributions to art conservation and her dedication to what it called preserving Southern heritage. Former colleagues remembered her fondly as detail-oriented and passionate about what they saw as historical accuracy. The photograph remained in Gallery 7, its truth buried under layers of black paint. By 2018, it had been on that same wall for 30 years. 3 full decades, during which thousands upon thousands of people looked at an image that had been deliberately falsified, never knowing they were seeing not authentic historical documentation, but historical erasure driven by personal prejudice. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell arrived at the Riverside Museum on a cool March morning in 2018, carrying her professional equipment case of music and a thermos of coffee to fuel what she expected would be routine work. At 42, she brought 15 years of specialized experience in photographic conservation to this job. The museum had hired her to assess their entire collection of 19th century photographs, a standard evaluation to ensure proper storage conditions and identify any pieces needing restoration. The project seemed straightforward. When she accepted it, document each photo's current condition, note any signs of deterioration, recommend treatment priorities based on urgency and importance. 3 months of steady, methodical examination across hundreds of images. Elizabeth set up her workspace in a climate-controlled room next to the museum's archives. She unpacked her large examination table, set up her professional lighting equipment, and arranged her collection of specialized tools. Magnifying lamps with multiple intensity settings, microscopes capable of extreme magnification, chemical testing supplies for material analysis. The photograph from Gallery 7 arrived on her examination table during the 2nd week of her contract. A music. She unwrapped it carefully from its protective covering, immediately noticing that fancy gold leaf frame. Beautiful craftsmanship, she thought. Quite an expensive frame for an 1850s photograph. Someone had put serious money into preserving this image. Elizabeth put the photograph under her main work light and leaned in for her first visual check. The image showed a black woman in what looked like dark, plain-to-music clothing. Her pose showed dignity. Her gaze met the camera directly. Nothing about the photo's physical condition immediately raised concerns. She saw no obvious tears, no excessive fading, no major emulsion loss needing urgent attention. But something caught Elizabeth's eye, setting off her professional instincts. The surface texture around the woman's shoulders and neck looked uneven compared to the rest of the image. She turned her magnifying lamp to a higher setting and examined that area more closely, bringing her face within inches of the surface. The paint, because she could now confirm it was definitely paint, not original photographic emulsion, looked glossy from certain angles. Too glossy. Genuine period photographs develop a characteristic matte surface as they age over decades and centuries. This section looked almost fresh by comparison, as if it had been applied relatively recently in historical terms. Elizabeth's heart sped up with recognition. She had seen this exact situation before during her 15-year career. Photographs that had been changed after their original creation. Sometimes those changes were innocent attempts at preservation by well-meaning but untrained family members or previous owners. Sometimes, though, they represented something far worse. Deliberate falsifications, meant to change what the photograph communicated about its subject. She reached for her high-powered microscope and positioned it over a small section of the woman's shoulder area. Under extreme magnification, the layers of material became immediately obvious to her trained eye. Beneath the dark surface paint, she could see hints of something completely different: lighter tones, different textures, materials that shouldn't exist under what should have been a single-layer photographic image. "Oh my God," Elizabeth whispered to the empty room. Barely audible. Someone had deliberately painted over the original photograph, hiding whatever had been there initially. Elizabeth spent the next hour examining every single inch of the image under high magnification, recording everything she found with detailed photos and extensive technical notes. The overpaint covered very specific areas: the neck, the shoulders, the upper chest, and both ears. The precision of these locations suggested intentionality. But why would someone target those particular parts of the photograph? What had been there originally that someone felt compelled to hide? She pulled out her laptop and opened the museum's digital archives, searching for any documentation related to this photograph. The conservation file was remarkably thin for such an old piece. Just one single entry from 1980. Treatment by Patricia Thornton. Surface cleaning and stabilization. Original integrity maintained. Elizabeth stared at that last phrase on her screen. Original integrity maintained. It was an outright lie, and she now had the scientific proof to show it. 3 days later, Elizabeth stood in Thomas Brennan's office, her laptop open on his desk. The museum director sat across from her, a man in his late 50s with distinguished silver hair and rimless glasses that reflected the overhead light. He had held his position for 12 years, carefully protecting the institution's reputation in the community and nurturing relationships with donors whose financial support kept the museum running. "Dr. Hartwell," Thomas said, gesturing to the chair across from his large wooden desk. "You said this was urgent." Elizabeth opened a digital folder of high-resolution photos she had taken during her examination. The 1850 photograph displayed in Gallery 7, the one labeled as an unknown free woman of color. Someone has significantly altered it. Multiple layers of paint have been applied over the original image. And based on all available evidence, this alteration most likely happened in 1988, when Patricia Thornton performed what she documented as conservation work. Thomas leaned forward across his desk, studying the images on her laptop screen. Elizabeth had annotated them heavily, using digital highlights to show the areas where overpaint was visible under proper magnification and specialized lighting. "You're absolutely certain about this conclusion?" "Without any doubt whatsoever. I've taken cross-section samples from the affected areas and done full chemical analysis on the materials. The paint layered on top is acrylic-based, completely consistent with conservation materials available in the 1980s. It is definitively not original to the photograph's creation in 1850. Thomas took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes warily. "What do you believe is underneath this overpaint?" "I can't be completely certain without physically removing all the overpaint layers. But based on what I can see at the edges, where the paint application is thinner, I'm convinced the woman was originally photographed wearing significantly more elaborate clothing than what's now visible. Almost certainly a lace collar, very likely some kind of jewelry. The overpaint application looks specifically designed to make her appear more plainly dressed than she actually was. Why would Patricia Thornton do something like that? Elizabeth had spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with exactly that question, trying to understand the psychology behind such an act. I can only speculate based on the evidence, but considering the time period this photograph documents and the very specific nature of the alteration Patricia made, I believe she fundamentally couldn't accept that a black woman in 1850 would have dressed so elegantly, so prosperously. She changed the image to match her own expectations of how that woman should have looked according to her understanding of racial and social hierarchies. The office fell into uncomfortable silence. Outside the window, traffic sounds drifted up from St. Charles Avenue. Somewhere in the building's lower galleries, a tour group's laughter echoed faintly through the walls. Thomas finally spoke, his voice measured. If you remove this overpaint and find what you're predicting underneath, this becomes a big story, a potential controversy. The media will report that our museum displayed a deliberately altered photograph for 30 straight years. The museum didn't know about the alteration. Elizabeth countered firmly. Thornton lied explicitly in her documentation. She claimed she maintained original integrity when she did the exact opposite. That distinction won't matter to journalists looking for a headline, or to our donors who expect us to maintain credibility, or to the communities who trust this institution to preserve historical truth accurately. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Patricia Thornton has been dead for 6 years. We can't even ask her directly why she did this. Mr. Brennan, whoever this woman was when she lived in 1850, she made conscious decisions. She sat for this photograph, which required a significant financial investment. She paid for it with her own resources. She chose deliberately how to present herself to history. Someone erased that choice decades later because of their own prejudices and inability to accept historical reality. Elizabeth's voice stayed steady, but carried unmistakable firmness. Don't you believe she deserves to have her authentic truth restored after all these years? Thomas looked at the comparison images on the laptop screen for a long moment, weighing the professional risks against the moral duty. He nodded slowly. Do it. Remove every bit of that overpaint. But I need you to document everything. Every single step of the process, every discovery you make along the way. If this becomes public knowledge, which it almost certainly will, we need to show complete transparency about what we found and exactly how we're correcting this historical injustice. What happened next is absolutely incredible. Dr. Hartwell spent weeks meticulously removing that paint. And what she uncovered challenged everything we thought we knew about free black women in the antebellum South. The transformation was so dramatic that when the museum finally revealed it to the public, some music, the story went viral worldwide. I'm going to tell you exactly what she found beneath that paint, who this mysterious woman might have been, and how this discovery changed museum practices across the entire country. But I need to split this into a second part, because there's just too much incredible information to fit into one video. So here's what I need you to do first. Make sure you've hit that like button if you're fascinated by this story. Second, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2. Where we reveal what was hidden for 30 years. Third, drop a comment below telling me what you think Patricia Thornton's real motivation was. Was it racism? Was it ignorance? Or was it something else entirely? Part 2 drops in 48 hours, and I promise you what Dr. Hartwell discovered beneath that paint will absolutely blow your mind. I'll see you there.